Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm the CEO of the Software House. As a software services company, we keep looking for ways to optimize our process and for tools which can help us with that. One of them is a very useful continuous integration and continuous deployment platform, BitBucket Pipelines from Atlassian, who you already might know as the creators of Jira. Today's speakers are Tomasz and Michał, who will tell you what pipelines are and how they might help you and your company. They will try to answer all of your questions, either during the presentation or at the very end. So keep asking, and we'll try to answer everything. Okay, take it from here, guys. Good luck.
Okay, so hello everyone. Let me share my screen and we can begin. All right, so it looks kind of funky, but yeah, I think we'll be good. So yeah, welcome everyone to today's presentation about BitBucket Pipelines. My name is Tomasz Kajtoch. I'm here with Michał Żądło, who's sitting on my left. And today we are going to be talking about BitBucket and the feature of BitBucket called pipelines, and how the pipelines can improve your development and deploying process. So yeah, the first thing that I want to tell is you can ask questions at any time of this presentation. However, it's worth mentioning that we will try to answer every question as fast as possible. However, we will leave the most complex ones to the end of this webinar, where we will do the QA session. So yeah, after that, let's start with a few words about us, the lecturers. So as I told you before, my name is Tomasz Kajtoch. I'm the Frontend Developer here at TSH. And Michał is a PHP developer, also working in TSH. And yeah, we want to show you the different aspects and different points of view when looking at the pipelines itself, to show you how we use them on both front-end and backend development, and how we improve the process using them basically in our products. And we both use the BitBucket pipelines for over a year now. It's more, I would say it's about a year and a half for both me and Michał. So yeah, I think we have pretty good experience with BitBucket pipelines, and today we want to share the knowledge we got with you guys. All right, so let's move forward to the agenda. We will start this webinar with saying a few words about automation in IT in general. Then we'll talk about what exactly is CI and CD and what problems do they solve. Then we will do a showcase of available options and possibilities using BitBucket pipelines and other tools on the market. Then we will dive into answering why we choose BitBucket pipelines over other tools. After that, we will give you a more detailed overview of BitBucket pipelines and its features. Then we will integrate running test sites into pipelines, which is basically the CI functionality. After that, there will be a showcase of BitBucket pipelines features, integrating deployment process with BitBucket pipelines, which is the CD, and our experience with BitBucket pipelines. And we will end everything with summary and, as I told you before, the QA session. All right, so let's go forward. Before we start the actual presentation, it's good to show you the context and the actual application we will want to deploy and automate. So the application is application we made for our event sourcing and CQRS workshop in our company, and it's for managing prisoners. So yeah, it's a quite simple application. However, it's using the common tools on the market to show you how to automate the entire process, not only the sample app. So the components of the applications are Nginx, PHP, of course MySQL as a database, Elasticsearch, and everything is Dockerized. So yeah, we have the base to run our Docker images in BitBucket Pipelines, but we'll talk about it a little later. All right, so what would the traditional or let's say manual deployment look like? So when we join the project, we probably look at the README file and try to find some information about how to deploy or how to run the project on the machine. So our setup is quite straightforward and typical to that application technology stack, which is connecting to the server via SSH, then creating a release directory, going to that directory, cloning our repository to get all the sources of our application, running composer install, running migrations, removing our previously built application, and creating a symlink for the new code we just cloned from the repository. And yeah, this is the process. But what is the automation in IT? So the automation is basically a process of is a automated controlling the software to do certain things without human interaction. So, for example, do 3 steps one after another, and it's basically to make our lives a little bit easier and to save us from making mistakes like missing some step or for example forgetting about doing something we need to do to deploy our application and ruin everything, for example. And for CI users, like in our case using Docker, this is often done by writing scripts, for example in Bash. And for the desktop applications, we can write software or use a software that simulates user interactions, like clicking through the screen or typing something on the keyboard. All right, so let's write a script that automates our deployment process. So, creating the directory, logging to the SSH, cloning the repo and everything. So yeah, when we write a script like that, we have some possible issues. So give me a sec. So the biggest question is where to store the script. We can do it locally on the server we want to run the deployment process. We can do it. We can store it locally on our machines. However, then we need to be aware of the versioning of that script. So everyone needs to have the latest version of that script that contains all the steps needed to deploy something. Because when your deployment process changes, and for example you at some step you need to run another command, for example to merge user data or anything like that, and someone doesn't have that version of that script and forget to run it, then for example your database can be destroyed, or it basically causes the application to fail. And how to handle different instances, for example, our staging, test and production environments, how to handle deploying different versions of code to different instances, or for example, running some different commands to each of that steps or environments, and where to store credentials or configurations for different instances. For example, the configuration for the production version can be different and may be different than the configuration for our staging, because the secret keys will be different, the API keys will be different, and probably some passwords too. So all the secrets can be stored somewhere, and we probably don't want them to be public or shared with multiple people. So yeah, that's the problem. And yeah, that's great, but we have some issues. For example, the deployment process is excluded from our repository, so everyone needs to be aware of possible changes in the deployment script. And each person that makes the deploy, for example, and when we have a team of DevOps that handles that, everyone have to be aware of changes in that script. So it needs to be stored somewhere and synchronized, of course. Also, the changes to deployment process needs to be applied to all instances. So not only to one instance that handles our production or multiple instances that handle that, but also to our test and staging environments. Because when we will change something and we forget to change the name of let's say an environment variable only on let's say that we forget to change it or add it on production, but we didn't forget to add it on staging, then we have some issues on the production deployment and we need to debug it, and it makes our life a bit harder. And how to deploy a custom branch? We need to modify our script, and we need to be prepared to do that. And what about running tests before deployment? It also adds a step to that entire process and the automation script we made. All right. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have 2 questions, so maybe
right.
we'll answer it. Alexandros asks, does this deployment process ensure zero downtime? Answer is no, it doesn't, because we want to show how the BitBucket Pipelines works, but it's up to you to handle zero downtime deployment. It's not BitBucket Pipeline doesn't force you to use some specific way of deployment. Yeah, it just allow you to deploy some specific application.
Yeah, so it handles the deployment process and not how your server does certain things. For example, it does not handle your HA proxy configuration to handle the zero downtime deployment, but you can do it. You can do it on some of the steps of your pipeline, but we will talk about it a little bit later. So I hope this answers your question. And if you want to ask about anything, then feel free to do that. Do we have any other?
Yeah, we have another question from Jacek. What about parameters YAML or .env file? Yeah, we didn't mention it because we want to just show how it looks in the old school way. It's not the real deployment process from some script. So we just show the basic way of deploying applications.
Yeah, and for example, creating the .env file makes it a little bit easier. However, yeah, it's not fully automated because you won't store the production data on your .env file, right? Especially if it's stored on your repository. Any other questions?
No questions. You can go further.
Okay, so let's move forward and see how the application deployment look like in our case and many other cases as well. First of all, we need to run our tests. So this means we need to build our application. We need to check code formatting to verify if everything is okay. Then check security issues and run test site. Next, for the build step, is building Docker image with the source code and pushing that image to our registry. And for the deployment process is connecting via SSH to the server we want to make a deployment to, pulling the fresh image from the registry and restarting the container. So what is continuous integration and continuous deployment then? If you don't know what CI and CD is, we'll give you the short answer what they are to have the picture of what we are saying. in this webinar. So basically, the continuous integration is a practice of automating the way how. So it's the process that allows you to run code or run specific commands based on each time you make a change to the repository. So for example, when you push something, when any developer push a branch or make a merge to the repository, the continuous integration ensures that some command will run and will, for example, check, run the test site and build the application and do all the preparation before running the actual tests. So continuous integration is basically running tests on each change on the repository and ensuring you that your code basically works. And continuous deployment is an extension of the continuous integration, adding to that process, also preparing the application to deploy. So as we mentioned, running security checks, building Docker image, and if you use Docker, of course, building Docker image, and do all of that steps that need to be done before actual deployment. All right, so what the market of automation tools look like? We have tools like Jenkins, which is great, and we used Jenkins before. However, we switched to BitBucket Pipelines because, yeah, it's a bit easier and cheaper for us, but we will talk about it a little bit later. We also have Travis, GitLab Pipelines, and Jobs, Circle CI, TeamCity, BitBucket, and BitBucket Pipelines we use. We also have some other tools, however, we didn't mention it because those ones are, I think, the common ones that the market uses. So as you see, we have plenty of options, and all of them have some advantages and disadvantages. So we need to be aware of that. And yeah, we want to show you why we choose BitBucket Pipelines over other tools. And I want to say that you can answer questions at any time you want. And yeah, let's move forward. So if you have any questions, just ask them on the comments section or the questions section on the webinars page. So why we choose BitBucket Pipelines over other tools? The most important thing was it's easy to use for both the developers and non-dev people. So for example, your project manager or product owner can also manage the deployments if they want, of course, or for example, deploy some specific versions to staging to check something or to verify if it works. And DevOps don't need to participate in the process. So anytime you need to change something, for example, add another environment variable or change the value to something else, for example, the Google tracking code or anything like that, then you don't need to ask DevOps to do that, and you don't need to take their time to do simple things like that. So editing the environment variable. It can be frustrating for both the developers and the DevOps team to handle that and to make sure everything is synchronized. So all the environment variables are always added to the process and always updated. Also, it's a step forward, at least in our opinion, in CI and CD automation. Also, it has out-of-the-box Docker integration, which is great. And if you have Dockerized environment, then the integration with BitBucket Pipelines is really, really easy and fast. And also, it does not require any additional servers or actions. So you don't need to ask your DevOps team to set up another server or to install some software, some update, anything like that, because everything is done on Atlassian infrastructure. So, and yeah, Atlassian is the owner of BitBucket. So yeah, you don't need to be worried about that. So the overview of BitBucket pipelines. It's perfect for teams that are using BitBucket because this is a tool that integrated with BitBucket. So its activation is as easy as changing as clicking to one switch on your settings of your repository. It runs on BitBucket's own infrastructure, and it's very low priced and has also free tier. So if you want to check that, or you have small team and you don't need, for example, a lot of build time to execute your tests or your continuous deployment, then you can use that free tier as well. It has YAML-based configuration, so it's really easy to set up and maintain for both the front end and backend guys, and also the DevOps team to change anything they want. And as I mentioned before, it's one-click activation tool. So activating the BitBucket pipelines is as easy as clicking on one button in the repository settings. So what the pricing of BitBucket pipelines look like? So the basic way of paying for your pipelines is you pay for build minutes, which is the same thing as execution minutes. So how long your scripts are executed, for example, your tests, how long your tests are running. There is a free tier for all the users, so even the users that use the free plan. If you use free plan, you get 50 build minutes each month. For the standard plan users, it's 500 minutes, and for premium plan, it's 1,000 minutes per month. So it's quite a lot of execution time for your scripts to test everything and to automate everything you want. And also you can extend that and buy additional minutes. And the packages of 1,000 minutes, build minutes are priced to $10. So it's very cheap. So let's talk about how much each build can take up. Speaking about resources, so each build can take up to 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is extendable to 8 gigabytes if you need to. You have 2 hours of execution time at max, so your script can execute for maximum 2 hours before being killed. And you have 5 gigabytes of disk space. And yeah, that's it for that slide. So let's say, let's move to integrating running tests with BitBucket pipelines, which is basically integrating the CI functionality. All right, so we need to create our BitBucket pipelines.yaml file and the root of our repository. And we need to define some values in there. So first of all, we need to say that we will be using PHP image, and this is the Docker image. So you're using the same naming as on Docker. And then we are setting up our pipelines. For running tests, which is the continuous integration, we define the default step. And the default means that this step will be executing each time, no matter of what branch this is or what author this is or anything like that. It will run automatically for each branch and each commit. So yeah, we define the step that's named setup and test. We say that we will use services MySQL, Composer, and Elasticsearch. We define our cache for the Composer. So we define our caches array, and then we say that we will we want to run the test.sh script from the BitBucket pipelines directory. So this will be the script that will be executing each time that step is running. So basically each time you make a change to the repository. Then we define some options, like we say that we are using Docker and we are setting the size to 2x, which means that you are getting 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of 4 gigabytes, but you pay twice as much for the build minutes. So maybe not pay, but you use twice as much build minutes than the script actually needs to run. So this is the pricing for running the pipelines that need more resources. And then we are defining configuration for our services. We are setting environment variables for MySQL. We're defining the password, user, and name of database. We are also, as you can see, setting the memory limit to 512 megabytes. And for the Elasticsearch, we're defining the maximum memory usage to 2 gigabytes, and for the Composer to also half gigabytes. All right, so then we need to create our test.sh script that will run on each time you will make a change to the repository, and the pipeline will run. So each time the pipeline runs, this script is executed. In the script, we have running update, apt install for the unzip. Then we are installing Composer, running Composer install, running security check, and running PHP spec, which is running our test sites. Okay, so let's move forward and do the almost live demo. Why almost? Because we pre-recorded it to speed some things up and to not waste your time waiting until the build is finished, and also to be sure that you won't waste time waiting for us to click on all the things. All right, so let's play it.
As you can see, we have inconsistent labels in the menu bar and the login form. Once it's sign in, once login. To fix it, we need to create a new branch for this issue. Let's name it fix/labels. Afterwards, we go to the IDE, and we are fixing the field set label and the submit button label. Then we need to commit our changes. Everything looks good, so we press commit button. Yeah. Now we need to push our changes to the repository. Then we can go to the BitBucket Pipelines web application to check what happens with our commit. And we can see the pipeline started, and we can follow it on the details page. Pipeline started the environment build process. Setting up an environment takes some time, so we speed up a bit the movie. Our script installing all required dependencies. The code style is checking and unit tests are running. Everything looks good. Setup and tests step status is updated to successful, and that's it. We made sure that our fix doesn't break our application, so we should be happy.
Yeah, exactly. And as you saw in that demo, everything about BitBucket Pipelines has a graphic interface. So, for example, debugging some issues or checking the error code of our test runner can be as easy as clicking to the pipelines section on the menu, clicking on specific run, and then checking the output of the script, or checking how the pipelines were executed. So yeah, this is really great and used for both developers and other people. All right, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have some questions.
All right.
Alexandros asked, could you have used a Docker image that comes preloaded with the Composer instead? I think it was instead the manual installing it. Yes, we can use it. But
Yeah.
Basically, download Composer and installing it, it doesn't take too much time. So we do it in this way because it was faster, I think.
Yeah, and you can use
For us.
you can use any Docker image you want. So
Yeah.
if you have some internal images in your company or something like that, you can use them too.
It's up to you how you manage it.
Yeah, exactly.
Pipeline just gives you a template to deploy application.
And this makes the BitBucket pipelines quite flexible in terms of customization and setting everything for you. All right. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, but maybe we'll answer it later on in the Q&A section.
Yeah. All right. So sorry for that, but the person that asked that question, you will need to wait a little bit for the answer. So let's improve our deployment process and what we just did, and also add the build and deploy steps, which will run we will build the Docker image with the source code of the repository, push the image to the registry, and for the deployment process, we will connect via SSH, pull fresh image from the registry, and restart the container. So to do that, we are defining our custom pipeline, which is called deploy, and it has two steps. First one is named the build. It also uses the cache composer, so all the composer files will be cached, and we don't need to waste our build minutes to, prepare the same directories for composer each time we run our tests or build. And for also continuing for the build step, we will run a script that's called build.sh from the BitBucket Pipelines directory, and we will use service called Docker, which is Docker. And for the second step, deployment step, we will use Atlassian default image. We will run the deploy.sh script, and we say that the deployment is for test. All right, so let's look at those build.sh and deploy.sh files we need to create. So for the deploy.sh, the first thing we do is exporting our data tag, which is set to hash of our BitBucket commit, and the BitBucket commit variable with the dollar sign before it is one of many BitBucket pipelines variables that are passed to your scripts, and they can contain things like the username, the commit, and stuff like that. Everything you will find on BitBucket Pipelines documentation. Then we are logging into the Docker registry using the username and passwords from Docker pipelines configuration. So we are basically setting the sensitive data, for example, the username and password we want to use on BitBucket pipeline settings, where they are securely stored and not accessible to everyone. So only people that have access to pipeline settings and that specific options can look at those values and can change them. So your sensitive data, for example, username, passwords, some secret keys to the applications and to third-party services are securely stored and don't need to be stored in the repository itself. Then we are building Docker image, pushing it to the registry, and running Docker logout to clear our session. And for the deployment process, to our deployment server, going to the prisoners directory, setting data tag to our BitBucket commit, to our .env file, running Docker compose to build our application and to set up everything. All right, so that's basically it. Let's improve it by also configuring the hooks for specific branches. So that means we are telling BitBucket Pipelines that we want to run specific steps of BitBucket Pipelines only when changes are made on our master or develop branches. And as you can see here, you can define the name of branches using glob patterns. So in our case, we defined that the branch name can be master or develop. But also you can, for example, use the git flow notation and say that all branches that have names feature slash asterisk, so feature slash anything, will trigger that steps of BitBucket Pipelines. All right, so moving forward, for the any change, any commit made to master or develop, there will be a pipeline triggered that will first set up and test everything, then run our build step and deploy step with the same options as we shown you before. So I won't describe everything because this is the same exact code we did before. However, if you take a closer look for the last step, the deployment step, we set the trigger key to manual, which basically means that the last step needs to be triggered by the user itself and will not be automatic. So as you see on the right part of the screen, after automatically executing setup and test and build steps, then pipeline will wait for the user to decide whether we want to run the deployment process or not. So yeah, this is another, let's say, security check or security setting to ensure each deployment build, each deployment will be safe and tested. All right, so let's move to live demo and see how it looks like.
Yeah. First, we are checking the current state, and you can see this inconsistency. To deploy a fixed application, we need to prepare a pull request. So we go to the BitBucket Pipelines web application. We are clicking the dedicated button and commit our change, create a pull request with our changes.
Yeah.
Now we need to merge our branch to the master. After that, a deployment process should start. We can observe it on a pipelines list, and we are going deeper into the details. And the same as before, our script needs to install all dependencies, check code style, and runs unit tests. It's ready, then it switches to the build step, where we create a Docker image containing the newest application code. Yeah, and we decided to deploy application manually, so we need to click this deploy button to check the deployment details, and we just deploy the application by one click. The deployment process is running. According to the deployment script, a new Docker image is pulling and the application container is recreated. Yeah. So we back to the login page. We refresh the page, and yeah, deployment was successful. So now we have consistent labels. So everything's went properly.
Yeah, everything went well, and the change was applied to the production. And yeah, at this moment, do we have any other questions that we can answer right now?
Yeah, Maciek wants to know what about availability of BitBucket pipelines. BitBucket and GitHub are often under DDoS attacks. Does it hurt our deployment process? So I think it's a separate infrastructure for it. It's not open for public use. So I think it's hard to kill these servers for pipelines.
Yeah, there might be maybe some attacks to it. However, yeah, from our experience, even if we had issues with, for example, accessing the BitBucket graphical interface, so the BitBucket org domain, and seeing everything as a web page, even if that didn't work, our pipelines were working correctly. So the tests were running, and if you set the deployment trigger to automatic, then there's a big chance that even if you do the change to your repository, to the branch or anything on your configuration, it will be applied no matter the graphical interface for BitBucket works or not.
Yeah, I think there can be problem with downloading the current version of code when it's this
however,
repository is under DDoS.
If the Git server is not working, then the pipelines won't run either because they are connected. However, if this is only an issue of the graphical interface of the BitBucket service, then we are fine. Yeah, and for the availability of Atlassian and BitBucket itself, I don't know what is the SLA for BitBucket and for the pipelines. However, we didn't find that something that we should be aware of, because every time we want to deploy something or to make some changes, everything works. So yeah, the platform is stable, and they are doing a really good job handling all those attacks. So even if you're not, if you want to make sure everything is stable, just see the status page of Atlassian, and there should be some statistics of availability of BitBucket pipelines. Yeah.
We have also a question from Alexandros. In the deploy step, can I make the deployment test, this flag, value be dependent on the branch? Example, deployment prod for the production branch and deployment test for the develop branch. Yes, you can, because you can define different configuration for each branch. We use, as I remember, for development and master branch the same configuration, but you can easily split it to two separate one. But I think it's better to use also test for master branch, because you can deploy it on the test server, then on staging, and in the end on the production server. So you can test it properly on each stage.
Yeah, so exactly. Because there are some guys that
I think it's better approach than connecting with the specific branch.
Yeah, I think so. Anything else?
No, I think we can go further.
All right, question-wise. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, so what is our experience with BitBucket pipelines? Yeah, you want to start?
Yeah, my experience with BitBucket pipelines is very positive. Previously, I've used Jenkins for it. It was prepared in most cases by our DevOps team. We had to maintain additional instance, server instance for it to handle tests and builds and so on. When we introduced some new feature which require a new environment variable, we need to ask DevOps to handle it, and it wasn't a very quick process. Of course, we can handle it by ourselves, but it's much more complicated than one file for BitBucket pipelines, I think.
Yeah.
So after switch to the BitBucket pipelines, we have whole process configuration in our repository, and as a developers, we have a full control of it. So I like this approach because we have control, so we can do what we want. Everything is Dockerized and run as a service without any additional instances, so it's also very useful for me. We can also use a custom Docker images, what makes it very flexible and simple to use. So, of course, as always, it depends on the project size and complexity, but I think it's suitable for most of the projects which I participated last few years.
Yeah.
So, what about your experience?
I agree with everything you said, and I have a pretty much similar experience with BitBucket pipelines. I want to add that we both used BitBucket pipelines for both the personal, commercial, enterprise projects, and it worked well, really well. And I want to say that for the personal projects, for example, the open source libraries and everything like that, it is really, really simple, and it doesn't require you, for example, when you are doing some personal library or personal software to handle anything. You don't need to have, for example, when we spoke about Jenkins. For Jenkins, integrating Jenkins and setting everything up just to handle some personal project is a bit overkill. And the Jenkins setup, according to the specifications and the common setup, should work on one master and one worker instance. So that gives you two instances you need to manage, you need to maintain, and you need to pay for. So yeah, for some small projects or for setups that don't require huge Jenkins configurations or integrations or anything like that, BitBucket pipelines will be a great choice. And also, if you use BitBucket, you can try pipelines for free and use them for free if you don't need to run your scripts for too long. And yeah, the one downside is that you need to use BitBucket in order to be able to use BitBucket pipelines, right? So all of your code needs to be on BitBucket, or you need to configure some repository cloning tools that will handle that for you. But yeah, that's an overkill for me. So if you use BitBucket, we encourage you to try BitBucket pipelines and try if it fits your needs. And if not, then yeah, there are other tools on the market. All right, so do you want to add anything?
Yeah, we had questions from Alexander, but Adrian already answered it.
All right.
About anchors in BitBucket pipelines to reuse the same steps. John asked if you launch pipeline each time someone will push commit to master. Is it automatically or manually? I didn't notice it. So basically, we run CI automatically in our example. Of course, it depends on the project. It's possible to use also automatic deployment. Then we have we need to change one flag, in our case, it was manual because we want to show that it's possible. You need to click this button and the deploy has started. Then you can also do it manually, and we basically disallow to commit straight to the master. It needs to be done by pull request. So, but yeah, it works like that. So you merge some commit to the master, and then the CI start, and depends on the configuration, deployment start, or we need to just trigger it manually.
Yeah, and it also adds the additional layer of security because you won't be able to run the deployment process when for example, test step failed. So if your tests are failing, you won't be able to make a deployment. You need to fix your tests, or you need to fix your code to be able to do deployment. So yeah, it's really safe.
Yeah. Rafa also asked about example configuration of project working with BitBucket pipelines. So we will share it after the webinar.
Yeah.
So you will be able to check the code of this specific application.
Yes.
So everything is public, so you can.
I don't know if the link for it is on the message that comes to your email, or
as I know, yes, it should be sent in the message after this as materials for this webinar.
Yeah, so you should get the message after this webinar, containing the link to the repository on BitBucket that you can clone, you can fork, and play around with BitBucket pipelines configuration and just try how it works. So yeah, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, but maybe let's go into the Q&A section.
Okay, so what we learned today? We learned what is IT automation, what problems are CI and CD solving. We also learned what are the available options for deployment automation, why we choose BitBucket pipelines over other solutions on the market, and what features they have. We also learned how to integrate deploy on demand, auto deployment, and test sites running into pipelines. What are the limitations of BitBucket pipelines and how to overcome them? For example, the size parameter that you can set to 2x and say in pipelines that they can use more memory. And how to optimize pipelines using caches. All right, so if you want to contact us, here are our email addresses. If you want to ask about anything specific or more or ask more detailed questions, then use the email to write to us, either to me or Michał. And we also encourage you to visit our site, which is tsh.io, and also our technical blog, which is on tsh.io/blog address, where we write about technical stuff, and yeah, you can learn much about many things. All right, so let's move to the QA section.
Yeah, Rishi asked, does BitBucket pipelines allow you to SSH into the test builds to allow you to debug any issues, failures occurring during automated testing? As I know, there is no possibility to hook into this process. You can print these errors on the console and you can just check it. In my experience, when something went wrong on the pipelines, it was always easy to reproduce on the development environment. So I have no such a need to check in the real time what's happened on this build process and BitBucket pipelines.
Yeah, because you can build the same image locally and play with it and check what's wrong. And BitBucket pipelines are more of a tool or to run steps one after another, and to check errors and to automate the process and not make it and not run the instance and share it to you like the Docker instance. Yeah, so it's more like the tool to automate your process and to make sure each step is running one after another. Yeah,
and you can always pull this image locally.
And
run steps into in this specific container.
And you have the detailed std out and std error visible on the BitBucket Pipelines section of BitBucket webpage, so you can debug everything, basically. And also, it's worth mentioning that BitBucket has a tool to check your pipelines configuration file. So you're basically pasting the configuration file there, and it runs the tests of the syntax and shows you how it will work step by step.
There's another question from Alexandros. Some people believe that once you have to SSH on the production server, your deployment process is not as straightforward as it should. These people usually use orchestration tools like Kubernetes. What is your opinion on that? I think it's better to have some orchestration tools for it. I'm not so purist, and sometimes it depends on the environment, client, and sometimes it's impossible to use such a tools for deployment. And so I think it's better to have Kubernetes or some other orchestration tool for it, but I'm not so that it needs to be done in this way. So also other solutions, but it always depends on the project. So it's hard to say that it needs to be done in this way.
Yeah, and we also need to match the client needs. So this is the most important thing, to make the client happy and not to use fancy tools just to make our lives 1% easier. All right. Do we have any other questions?
I think we answered all questions. I hope we didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of questions in chat. So
if you have any other questions, let's just write us an email and we'll try to answer you as fast as possible. So thank you for today. And we hope you learned something. And as I told 1 minute before, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on writing to us on email. And thank you for being with us today.